I only left the campsite for 2 minutes. When I came back, nothing looked wrong, but my coffee mug had been moved, and inside it was a lock of my own hair. That's when I realized someone had already been inside my tent. That night, I heard them outside, running a finger slowly along the zipper, like they were deciding whether to come in. By morning, they weren't hiding anymore. They were leaving messages, watching me sleep, and somehow they knew things about me I'd never told anyone. Welcome back to Ethereal Echoes. Settle in, get comfortable, and let the world fade away. We'd been here for all of 5 hours, and I already hated the way the air moved, thick with sap, biting with wet rot, a million tiny mouths gnawing at exposed skin. Sarah and Mike had their folding chairs stacked just shy of the old fire pit, legs splayed like children at recess, beer cans crushed, cigarettes pinched to nothing. They laughed easy, not because anything was funny, but because Forrest made them nervous. As if all those trees pressed against each other just to whisper about us. I excused myself with a half-formed joke about breaking the Girl Scout oath, but they didn't bother to ask where I was going. That's what I liked about these weekends, the way no one was accountable after nightfall. It was almost enough to forgive Sarah for the drama at the supermarket last week, or Mike for still pretending he didn't know why we picked this particular campsite. The ground sloped down to the creek in a tangle of moss and barbed roots, mud slurping around my ankles with every step. I stopped behind a stand of black pines, just far enough to muffle their laughter, but not so far I'd need to call out if something slithered up my pant leg. Pulled my shorts down and squatted, watched the moon thread itself between branches, too dull to bother with a reflection. Halfway through, a pocket of air shifted behind me, warm, rank, with the sickly sweetness of wet dog. My scalp seized. I told myself it was nothing, a dead possum fermenting in the brush, but I could feel the hair on my neck recalibrating for a threat. The sound was soft, a thumb sliding over a blade, but unmistakable. Someone breathing, just above and behind. I jerked up, yanking my underwear crooked in the rush. I spun around. He was 10 feet away, standing absolutely still between the trunks, not even trying to blend in. Hoodie up, hands pocketed. I couldn't see his face, but I felt it. A smooth black pit where features should be. I hate to say I was more annoyed than afraid. This is the kind of thing Mike would pull, thinking he was clever. And if not Mike, then some tweaker desperate for a phone and half a pack of Marlboros. I squared up and shouted, "Real original," though my voice cracked like a windshield under gravel. Not a flinch, not a shift, just breathing, heavy, timed. I waited, shins itching, mouth dry. The figure stepped behind a tree, that's all. No rustle, no snap, just one slow, confident slide into the thick. Gone. I exhaled, long and cowardly, feeling like a moron for playing into it. When my pulse slowed, I squatted again, finished my business, and wiped with a leaf that looked questionably safe. Heading back, the world felt different, as if the trees had rewritten their script in the dark. I set my steps quick and loose, not wanting to look like I was running. Halfway up the path, pain split the back of my left leg. Sharp, surgical, a line of fire slicing through the meat of my calf. I yelped, tumbled forward, and caught myself on a rock and swore. I looked down, a bright thread of blood stitched across my skin, trickling into the top of my sock. No sign of what did it. Nothing on the trail but a pale curl of birch bark and the deep gash, maybe a 1/4 inch wide, bleeding with more enthusiasm than deemed necessary. I checked for glass, thorns, anything rational. Found nothing. Maybe I clipped a wire, but there wasn't a fence for miles. The thought tickled behind my eyes in a way I didn't like. By the time I hobbled back to camp, Sarah had her headlamp on, already deep into the red wine. Mike was roasting 2 marshmallows at once. Burrow frowned in mock concentration. The fire spat resin and hissed, throwing angry sparks at my shoes. "Everything come out okay?" Sarah asked, eyes glassy. "Yeah," I said, pulling my sock up to cover the blood. "Bit of a murder scene down there. Nothing serious." She laughed, the sound empty, and went back to scrolling her phone with methodical swipes. I wondered who she was texting. Not me. Maybe that guy from her work, the one she called Caramel Jesus, because he always brought her gourmet chocolate after lunch. I didn't care, but it was easier to think about that than the hoodie in the woods. Mike squinted at my leg, marshmallow sagging on the end of a bent coat hanger. "You good?" "I tripped on a root," I lied, biting off the word. "Trail's a mess." He grunted. "Should wear boots, city girl." I nodded, went to the tent, and pretended to organize the sleeping bags, which is to say, I sat inside for 20 minutes, breathing like someone might be measuring it. The rest of the night blurred into ugly comfort. Cheap whiskey, burned sugar, stories that all ended with, "You had to be there." No one mentioned what happened last time we went camping. No one mentioned what happened to Anna. At 1:12 a.m., I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the twin symphonies of Sarah's snoring and Mike's restless zipper. The man peed at least 3 times a night. Diabetic bladder or nerves? I picked at the scab on my calf, pressing it until a single bead of blood welled up and darkened the synthetic liner. That's when I heard the other zipper. Slow, deliberate, right outside the tent wall. At first, I rationalized. A raccoon, a possum, even a breeze. But the sound wasn't animal. It wasn't human. Someone tracing the teeth of the zipper with the tip of a finger, patient and steady. I didn't dare breathe. I pictured the hooded figure crouching there, smiling, waiting for me to say his name. I pressed my face into the clammy nylon, stared at the arc of the moonlit grass outside the mesh, and waited for the silhouette to appear. But nothing came. The zipper never moved again. I stayed awake until Sarah's alarm chirped, and even then, I lied about how well I slept that night. The morning light was mean. It sharpened every cheap synthetic surface and threw my shadow longer than it needed to be. Sarah had already boiled water and poured it into her travel French press. But the mug she set out for me was not the one I used. My chipped blue mug, stolen from an ex-sublet 3 cities ago, now faced away from the camp, at the exact edge where the trees began. It sat precisely at the boundary, as if someone was offering a small, brittle piece to the woods. I chalked it up to early bird Mike being anal about wildlife protocols, but the handle was sticky, and when I lifted it, something clicked at the bottom. I tipped the mug over. Out slid a single pine needle, so rigid and green it looked fake. It pointed unmistakably in the direction of my tent. Nestled beside it was a tuft of hair. Mine, unmistakably, because it was knotted with the same elastic I wore to sleep. For a second, the world pinched in at the edges, the way a headache does when it's warning you of a migraine to come. I didn't call Sarah over. I put the mug down, turned it so the handle was away from me, and sat on my haunches in the dirt. Watched as the day slowly reheated old fears and served them up burnt and raw. Mike was already in the water, yodeling about leeches, his hairy, pale legs making V's through the surface. Sarah stripped to her bathing suit, black, no frills, practical, then did a knee-high warm-up as if the trees needed convincing that she deserved to be here. "Are you coming in?" she asked. "Did you mess with my mug?" She looked at me the way you look at roadkill that might still be breathing. "What?" There was hair in it. My hair. Like, tied up in a knot. Sarah laughed, but it fell flat. "Babe, you're just overtired. Remember last time you sleptwalked and stacked all those shoes?" I did not remember, but I nodded. "Yeah, just felt weird, that's all." She tilted her head, the way she did when she was worried I might turn the conversation into an incident. "Come swim," she said. "It'll clear your head." But I stayed on shore. After they left, I slipped into the tent, pretending to rummage for my sunscreen, but really just wanting to hear the fabric zip, taut and reassuring. I scanned for evidence, new footprints, torn seams, maybe even a stray thread from the hoodie, but found only what I'd left before. The sleeping bag, though, was folded so precisely it looked factory fresh. I didn't remember doing that. I sat on the bag and ran my fingers over my calf. The cut from last night was still angry, rimmed with purple. I pressed it, and it stung. That was at least real. That's when I noticed the bruise on my inner thigh. Oval, yellow-green, with a crescent shadow like a fingerprint pressed in wax. Thumb-sized, unmistakable. I tried to recall when I might have fallen, or whether I squeezed my own legs too hard in the night. The skin was unbroken, but tender. That's when the panic nestled. Not that big kind, the take off your shoes and run to the road kind, but the slow, spinal creep that comes when something is wrong and no one will ever believe you. I pulled up my notes app, thumbed a new entry. I'm not crazy. Yet. Tuesday night, someone in the woods. Hoodie. Male. Caught on calf, not explained. Mug moved. Hair inside. Pine needle. Sleeping bag folded. Bruised inner left thigh. I hovered over the send button, tempted to forward it to myself as evidence. Instead, I just saved the note. The digital air felt heavy. Even the icons seemed to squint in judgment. I rejoined Sarah and Mike, pretending not to shiver in the muggy air. Mike made a show of flexing his chest and shouting, "You coming, city girl? Or are you gonna write a Yelp review of the lake?" Sarah cackled, water streaming from her nose, and I forced a smile. "I'm documenting everything," I said, raising my phone. First entry, friendly locals, would drown here again. They splashed and mocked, but it was like watching actors recite from a script that I'd outgrown. Everything echoed, even their laughter. When I blinked, I saw the pine needle pointing at my tent, the coil of hair stuck in my head, worming deeper every minute. That night, I agreed to a round of whiskey shots and horror stories, the kind where Mike always managed to turn the punchline back onto himself. We laughed too loud, made shadow puppets against the tent walls. At midnight, Sarah fell asleep, still wearing her headlamp, the glow pressing a flat blue dot onto her eyelids. I lay awake for hours, thumb tracing the bruise, half waiting for the zipper to move again. It didn't. But around 4:30, a woodpecker started up on a tree, so close it sounded like it was tunneling through the nylon. I knew better than to hope it was just a bird. The second night was colder. Sarah double-layered her fleece, zipped it so high her jawline vanished. Mike lined the fire pit with extra stones. then declared it a superior engineering solution and poured more fuel than necessary. The flames were cartoonish, orange and loud, but they cast the woods into darker relief. The shadow lines started closer, and every pop of resin sounded like someone stepping just beyond sight. The stories came out forced, each of us tripping over the beginnings, forgetting whether we were supposed to be spooked or just killing time. Sarah told one about a drowned girl who haunted a culvert under a highway. Mike, not to be outdone, made up some story about a cannibal hermit who marked his territory with X's. My turn came, and I blinked. The only ghost stories I believed in were the kind you had to invent to explain yourself to a parent or a lover. So I said nothing and let them tangle their own narrative knots, laughing when they did, drinking when they didn't. At 1 a.m. on the dot, I woke with a start. Not because of Sarah's snoring or a bottle rolling in the dirt, but because I heard my own voice, 5 feet from my pillow, reciting words I only ever used in arguments with Anna. If you're gonna lie, at least do it better than that. You're embarrassing us both. It wasn't a whisper. It was crisp and deliberate, like a voice memo played into my ear from just outside the tent. I froze, fist clenched in the sleeping bag, heartbeat so loud I thought maybe I'd only dreamt it. But it repeated, verbatim, then stopped. I shivered and pressed my face into my knees, hoping it would end. In the morning, the cold was worse. My phone battery, dead. But Sarah's watch chirped at exactly 7:10. I stepped out to piss, trying not to look at the woods, and immediately saw the new addition. A fragment of mirror, maybe the size of a salt line, nailed to a tree facing our camp. Not random, dead on, aligned with the mouth of my tent. I approached wary. My reflection in the shard was bunched and yellow, my eyes swollen from lack of sleep. Underneath, gouged into the bark with something metal, were the words, "You sleep so peacefully." I read it twice. The second time, the sarcasm was palpable. My own voice, if I were leaving notes to myself. I reached up to rip the mirror down, and the edge caught my palm, peeling a strip of skin so cleanly I barely felt it at first. But the blood welled instantly, fat and perfect, so red against the moss that I stared at it for a few seconds, dumbstruck. Back at camp, I tried to hide the cut, but Sarah noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah, just snagged myself on a branch." She pursed her lips, unconvinced, but handed me a napkin from her supply kit. "Maybe we should pack up, go into town for breakfast, get some space from these Blair Witch vibes." Mike grunted. "It's just a meth head screwing with us, or a high school prank. You want to let them win?" I surprised myself by siding with him. "We're not leaving early. It's probably nothing. I just want to finish the weekend. Sarah shot me a look, part gratitude, part suspicion. You sure? Yeah, I said, cramming the napkin into my pocket. I'm fine. Let's just stay. But the whole time, I felt the mirror fragment in my palm, its edge still bright and hungry for more. The day dragged. Sarah read a paperback on the grass. Mike played solo frisbee. I pretended to nap, but really just played last night, over and over again in my head, hearing my own voice on repeat, echoing from the hollow in the trees. I wanted to ask if either of them had heard it, but I already knew the answer. If they had, they wouldn't admit it. That night, I slept with the tent flaps zipped and double-checked, face turned from the woods. I did not dream. Or if I did, I refused to remember it. On the third day, Mike left without warning. Work thing, he said, stuffing the tent into its pouch with all the care of a hospital orderly bagging linens. If you two want to ride out, now's the time. I looked at Sarah, but she shook her head. We'll finish it out. We don't mind. Mike shrugged, said nothing more. His car rolled down the gravel path, tires whining for 100 yards before the trees swallowed it. After that, the silence changed. With only the two of us, every sound doubled in meaning. Bird calls hung longer. The wind sounded like a message barely out of earshot. Sarah didn't read. She rearranged our supplies instead, lined up the food tins and the bug spray, as if geometry could hold the wild at bay. Let's do the overlooked trail, she said at noon, voice brittle with optimism. If we don't, we'll end up circling the same patch of dirt all day. The overlook was 3 miles and well marked, but we hiked in silence. The only words between us were functional. Route, bridge, poison ivy. At the lookout, we sat. We sat and ate granola bars, eyes on the same horizon, but not really seeing it. I wanted to ask if she remembered what happened to Anna, but my tongue felt stapled to the roof of my mouth. Instead, I said, "Did you see that mirror thing this morning?" She nodded. "Yeah, I thought you put it there." "Why would I do that?" She didn't answer, just chewed, then spit a sunflower hull over the edge. When we returned, our campsite had been edited, not ransacked, just adjusted. My tent was zipped, but the flap had been folded into a weird triangle at the bottom, as if someone had tried to make it into an origami animal and given up. My sleeping bag, which I left balled in the corner, was stretched flat across the foam mat. The photo of my mother, always kept in the mesh pocket near my head, was face down. I lifted it, expecting something on the back. Instead, the front was smudged with a crescent of mud right over her eye. Deliberate, like a thumbprint. I wiped it away and hid the photo deep in my pack, somewhere I wouldn't have to look at it again. Sarah's mug was now filled with water. The liquid inside had a reddish tinge, like someone had stirred a drop of food coloring. Or blood. A thin film glistened at the surface, catching the light like oil. I didn't touch it. Instead, I unlaced my boots and let my socks dry. Something hard poked my heel. At the toe of my right boot was a folded scrap of paper, thin and yellowing, like it had been torn from a motel notepad. I unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a drawing, my own sleeping face, done in quick pencil lines. The perspective was from the outside of the tent, looking through the mesh. Every detail was obsessive. My jaw slack, hair fanned out on the pillow, even the ugly cut on my calf. On the back, scrawled in tight letters, "My mark is already on you." I didn't show Sarah. I just slipped the sketch back into the boot and put it on, pressing my heel hard against the paper until it folded to the shape of my foot. That night, I wore my headlamp like a medallion, strapped tight against my sternum, clicked it on and off, draining the battery, counting the beats between each breath. Sarah lay in her tent, barely moving. I heard her sniffle, maybe from allergies, maybe from the pressure. The woods were silent, but the air buzzed with threat. I imagined the hoodied man, still out there, watching, or maybe waiting for me to prove I deserved what was coming. At dawn, I woke with my fist pressed to my chest, headlamp digging into my collarbone, and my left hand throbbed. I held it up to the light. A thin, perfect slice ran across the top of my hand. Shallow, but unmistakable. It wasn't there when I went to sleep. It stung, but I didn't bleed. It felt less like an attack and more like a signature. By the fourth morning, even Sarah wanted out. She said so with her face more than her words. Tight lips, rapid blinks, movements clipped at the joints. We broke camp in record time, cramming tents and blankets into bags without even shaking the dirt out. The air felt electrical, every particle charged with a promise of a storm. The plan was simple. Hike down to the car, drive into town, sleep at Motel 6, and never mention the woods again. Except when we reached the parking lot, the hood of Sarah's old Corolla was popped, and both battery terminals were loose, the cables dangling like snapped tendons. "Did you do this?" Sarah snapped. I wanted to be angry, but the question was so stupid it barely registered. Why would I do that? She shook her head. Never mind. We screwed the terminals back on, but the car refused to start. The click of the key was so loud and sterile it made me sick. After the third try, Sarah slammed the door so hard the mirror threatened to pop off. "We'll walk," I said, as if it was reasonable. She nodded, eyes glassy, and started uphill without waiting for me. The day went sideways quickly. We'd both done this hike before, a 2-hour walk, 11 kilometers at worst. But the first kilometer felt endless, the trail markers missing or repainted with a different color than the map showed. Every fork seemed wrong. At one point, we looped back to the same dead tree, a lightning-blasted pine with a spiral scar at chest height. We stared at it, then at each other, then pretended it was just coincidence. Sarah's water bottle was empty, but when I offered her mine, she recoiled. "It smells weird," she said, holding it to her nose. I sniffed. It was faintly metallic, like pennies or blood. We pressed on. Halfway up a ridge, my phone buzzed. A full bar, but no carrier. I tried to text 911. Just the number and the words, "help." Nothing. Sarah tried hers too. Same results. The next time we reached the pine, the spiral in its bark was sticky, with a fresh ribbon of sap. I touched it, and my finger came away red. Not blood, but close enough to scramble my stomach. Sarah started muttering under her breath, pacing, looking for a signal with the phone held above her head like a diving rod. She tripped over a root and nearly fell. "I swear to God," she said, voice tremoring, "if you're doing this, if this is some kind of head game." I almost laughed. "I'm not that clever." She glared, then turned away, rubbing her arms. We walked for another hour. The woods felt denser, closer, as if they'd grown overnight. At every turn, I imagined the hoodied man just out of sight, parallel, tracking us, waiting for us to collapse. I had no proof he was there, but I also had no proof he wasn't. Without warning, Sarah spun on me. "You want to tell me why you're so calm?" I stopped dead. "I'm not calm." She stepped forward, eyes wet. "I can't even breathe, and you're just logging it all, like you're a fucking biologist watching a rat get electrocuted." I looked down, embarrassed. "It's not fair." She laughed, ugly and hollow. "You never cared about Anna. You just liked the way she made you feel dangerous." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Sarah shoved me, hard. I lost my balance and tumbled sideways into a tangle of low branches. One of them caught my cheek, ripped a line across it from eye to jaw. The sting was instant and deep. I pressed my palm into it and felt the blood hot and viscous. Sarah's face crumpled. I didn't, sorry. I didn't answer. I just pushed past her, following the trail without looking back. We hiked in silence for another hour, or maybe 2. My cheek bled for most of it, then crusted over with the filth of the forest. My throat tightened, the pressure mounting. At some point, I realized I was breathing too fast, my heart running triple speed, every inch of my skin clammy and numb. I recognized the panic for what it was, but I told Sarah nothing. She needed me to be stable, and even if it was a lie, I wanted to give her that. When we finally stopped, it was because the trail had disappeared entirely. The ground was just brush and loose shale, no markers or footprints. I sat on a flat rock, head in my hands, and let the tears come silently. My face stung, my leg ached, and my hand throbbed. I checked my phone. Still one bar, but nothing went through. Sarah crouched a few yards away, her knees drawn up to her chest. For the first time all day, she didn't look angry. She looked scared. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. We were so close, just 2 feet apart, but I might as well have been on another planet. I thought of the sketch, the mirror, the words. My mark is already on you. I believed it. The sun began to set. The woods were silent except for our twin heartbeats racing out of sync. By sunset, we were back at the original camp. I don't know how it happened. Maybe we walked in circles, or maybe the woods decided for us. The fire pit was a black ring. Our folding chairs still splayed where we left them. Marshmallow sticks collapsed in the ash. Sarah's voice was the last sound for a while. She said she was going to look for a ranger station, take the lower trail, see if she met up with a service road. Stay here, she said. Rest. I'll be back by dark. Her face looked older in the orange light, tired and far away. I nodded, but the moment she turned the corner, I knew I'd never see her again. I sat by the fire, cold, even though the air was thick with the promise of rain. My cheeks still bled in slow, syrupy drips. My left hand throbbed. I flexed it and watched the wound open and close, a second mouth hungry for explanation. I let the sun go. I watched the sky until it shut off, a shade drawn over the world. I listened to the woods, the 1,000 small voices ramping up as dark replaced vision. When he came, I heard nothing. Not a twig, not a shuffle. He just appeared, standing at the edge of the firelight, hands at his side. The hoodie was gone. He wore a shirt, plaid, the kind you buy at Target in 3 packs. His jeans were old, knees caked with mud. He looked exactly how you'd want a stranger to look. Forgettable, harmless, easy to explain away. He stepped forward and sat on the log opposite me. The space between us was measured, polite. I didn't speak. He didn't either, at first. He stared at the fire, then at my face. His eyes were watery blue, almost translucent. He smiled, then frowned, as if trying on each for size. After a minute, he said, "You don't recognize me?" It wasn't a question. I shook my head, too tired to pretend. He nodded, like this was the only outcome worth considering. He looked at my hand, then my cheek, then the old cut on my calf. "You're not easy to follow," he said, "but you don't make it impossible." I waited. He glanced up, reading my silence. "I saw you in the city last fall. You bought coffee. Then you went to the same bench and ate a croissant with both hands, tearing it apart like a kid. Your hair was different, shorter maybe." My scalp prickled. I tried to recall that day, but it was 1 in 1,000 of carbon copies. He went on, "Your old apartment had that blue awning. You lived above that place that made bad pizza. You called your mother every Thursday at 5. He paused, then looked at me straight. "Until she died." I blinked. The fire snapped. A cinder floated up and vanished. He picked a scab at his finger. "I've been here since the day before you arrived. Didn't think you'd ever leave the city again," he shrugged. "You were the first person in 3 years who felt safe to watch." I wanted to run, but my legs were pins and glass. I wanted to scream, but my mouth was filled with old secrets, ones I thought I'd bury. He scooted closer, careful not to spook me. "You always try to solve things by yourself," he said. "But you want to be noticed. You always have." I felt naked, exposed in a way that had nothing to do with skin. He looked at my face again, reached out and traced a line across my cheek, exactly where the branch had split me. His fingers were warm, the pressure light but unyielding. He stopped at the corner of my mouth and let his hands fall to his lap. Blood welled up, a single bead, and he watched it with the patience of a monk. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. I almost laughed. "You already did." He nodded, sad, but not like that. We sat for a long time, the fire shrinking, the dark pushing in. My thoughts slowed, thickened. I could hear his breath, slow and even, as if pacing me. At some point, my headlamp clicked on, the white LED flooding his face. The suddenness made me flinch, but he didn't move. He blinked once, then smiled, small and perfect. He said, "You can leave if you want, or you can stay and finish your story." He didn't look away. The light made his skin pale and eyes huge. I felt my chest tighten, the panic rising, but also a kind of peace, like being caught in the act of something you always knew was wrong, but did anyways. I wondered if Sarah made it to the road, if she told anyone about me, or if she just kept walking until she was erased. I didn't move. I didn't run. I matched his breathing. I let him mark me. In the morning, the fire was nothing but bone-white ash, and the woods were full of birds again, I sat on the log and waited for my story to end. And somewhere, deep in those woods, the fire pit is still cold. The mirror is still nailed to the tree. The note is still folded inside the boot. And something out there is still watching. If you've enjoyed tonight's story, you can find more from Ethereal Echoes, new psychological thrillers released every Wednesday and Friday. And if you'd like to hear them early and without ads, you can join us on Patreon. For now, let the forest go quiet. Let the path disappear behind you. But if you wake up with a scratch you can't explain, or something small has been moved, or you feel like you're being watched, you might not have left after all. Some things don't follow, they choose. And if it chooses you, it's already closer than you think. Good night.